little one. Join us!
On a biting winter evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, and the sky bleeds from a bruised purple into a cold, unforgiving obsidian, have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver at your feet that seemed to defy the natural rhythm of the wind? Perhaps you were walking alone, the rhythmic crunch of frost-covered leaves under your boots, providing the only soundtrack to the encroaching shadows. You did not trip over a stray root, nor did you brush against the jagged edge of a rusted fence. There was simply a flash of movement in the corner of your eye, a momentary distortion of the air like a heat haze in reverse, and a single, razor-sharp gust of wind that whistled past you with the precision of a duelist's blade. In that moment, you might have felt nothing more than a localized drop in temperature, a fleeting sensation of cold that you dismissed as a mere trick of the season. But then, as the pale glow of a flickering street lamp catches your silhouette, you look down and feel a jolt of primal terror that freezes the very breath in your lungs. The heavy fabric of your trousers has been sliced open with surgical accuracy, a perfectly straight line that no accidental snag could ever produce. And beneath that severed cloth, carved into your very skin, lies a deep, crescent-shaped wound that stares back at you like a silent, accusing eye. The most unnerving part of this encounter is not the wound itself, but the eerie, unnatural silence of your own nervous system. There is no searing heat, no throbbing pulse, and no sharp cry of agony. It is as if your body has been edited by a silent filmmaker, the pain removed from the reel entirely. You touch the edges of the cut, expecting the warm, metallic stickiness of blood to coat your fingers, but your hand comes away dry. The wound is clean, deep enough to reveal the pale, shimmering layers of tissue beneath the dermis. Yet not a single drop of crimson spills forth to mar the winter snow. It is a biological impossibility, a defiance of every law of anatomy you have ever known. This, you realize with a creeping dread, is the unmistakable signature of a legend that has haunted the Japanese archipelago for centuries. This is the work of the Kamaitachi, the sickle weasel, a phantom that rides the whirlwind, an invisible predator that strikes without motive and vanishes without a trace. Tonight, we shall peel back the layers of this atmospheric enigma, traversing the narrow bridge between ancient folklore and modern physics, to understand the true nature of the wind's hidden blade. To understand the mechanics of a Kamaitachi attack, we must first reconstruct the moment of impact with the obsessive detail of a forensic investigator. Imagine the air not as a transparent void, but as a fluid, heavy and pressurized, swirling with unseen currents and dormant energies. When the phenomenon occurs, witnesses often describe a sudden, localized turbulence, a miniature cyclone that erupts out of nowhere. The victim is caught in a momentary vacuum, a pocket of space where the laws of friction seem to momentarily suspend. Like a master assassin who has refined his craft over 1,000 lifetimes, the entity, or the phenomenon, moves with a velocity that exceeds the human eye's ability to process. The air itself becomes a weapon, sharpened by centrifugal force into a blade of such extreme fineness that it bypasses the body's nociceptors, the pain receptors that should be screaming in protest. You do not feel the cut because the cut is too perfect. It is the ultimate paradox of trauma, a wound so clean that the brain refuses to acknowledge its existence until the evidence is presented visually. This sensory lag creates a profound psychological rupture, a feeling that you have been touched by something that exists outside the boundaries of the material world. Why does the wound remain bloodless? Why does the agony wait until much later to arrive? In the absence of scientific instruments, the people of ancient Japan turned to the world of the supernatural to find an explanation for this grotesque artistry. They did not see the wind as a mere movement of gas, but as a crowded highway for gods, demons, and spirits. The most enduring explanation comes from the snow-shrouded regions of Shinetsu, where the Kamaitachi is not viewed as a single creature, but as a coordinated triumvirate of divine or demonic brothers, each specializing in a specific stage of the assault. The first brother is the initiator, a force of pure kinetic energy that strikes the victim's legs, with the weight of a falling branch, causing them to lose their balance and stumble into the path of the unseen. As the victim falls, suspended in that weightless moment between standing and impact, the second brother strikes. He carries the sickle, a blade forged from the very essence of the cold north wind, and with a single practiced flick of his wrist, he carves a crescent into the exposed flesh. But the cycle is not yet complete. Before the victim's body even hits the ground, the third brother follows, clutching a jar of celestial salve. He applies this mystical ointment to the fresh wound with lightning speed. It is a substance of such potent power that it instantly cauterizes the blood vessels and numbs the nerves, ensuring that the victim remains unaware of their mutilation until the three brothers have long since vanished into the next gust of wind. This mythic tripartite structure is more than just a campfire story, designed to frighten the superstitious. It is a remarkably sophisticated metaphorical framework for a complex physical event. The people of the Edo period were keen observers of the natural world, and they recognized that the Kamaitachi phenomenon involved a sequence of distinct phases: impact, incision, and an unnatural physiological response. By personifying these phases as three brothers, they were able to categorize and communicate a phenomenon that would otherwise be dismissed as madness or hallucination. It represents an early attempt at a systemic analysis of trauma, an effort to find order in a world where the very air could turn against you. When you are faced with an invisible enemy that can bypass your armor and your skin without a sound, creating a narrative is the only way to retain your sanity. It transforms a random act of atmospheric violence into a ritualized encounter with the divine, providing a strange sort of comfort in the face of the inexplicable. As the sun of the Meiji Restoration rose over Japan, bringing with it the cold, analytical light of Western science, the gods and demons of the wind were forced into the shadows. The newly formed scientific community sought to replace the three brothers with the rigid laws of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. For decades, the most dominant theory was the vacuum hypothesis. It was argued that within the heart of a powerful whirlwind or a dust devil, a pocket of extreme low pressure could form instantaneously. If a person were to be caught in this localized vacuum, the internal pressure of their own body, particularly the moisture in the skin and the gases in the blood, would attempt to equalize with the outside environment. This pressure differential would cause the skin to literally burst outward, creating a clean surgical tear that resembled a blade's cut. This theory was so widely accepted that it was printed in official science textbooks, taught to generations of students as the definitive triumph of reason over superstition. It offered a tidy, logical explanation for the bloodlessness and the lack of pain, suggesting that the pressure itself acted as a temporary tourniquet. However, as our understanding of physics deepened in the mid-20th century, the vacuum theory began to crumble under the weight of its own mathematical improbability. For a whirlwind to generate a vacuum, powerful enough to rupture human flesh through layers of winter clothing, the wind speeds would have to reach near supersonic levels. If such a vortex were to manifest in a residential street or a mountain pass, it would not merely scratch a passerby, it would level buildings, uproot ancient cedars, and shatter windows for miles around. The energy required for such a localized pressure drop is staggering, and it simply does not occur in the gentle yet treacherous gusts that characterize a Kamaitachi report. We find ourselves in a strange historical position where the scientific explanation that once debunked, the myth has itself been debunked, leaving a void where certainty used to be. Once again, the wind has slipped through our fingers, mocking our attempts to measure it with thermometers and barometers. We are left standing in the cold, realizing that the scientific reason we believed in for a century was just another kind of folklore, one dressed in the language of equations rather than demons. So, if it is not a vacuum and it is not a trio of gods, what does modern meteorology have to offer the victim of the sickle wind? The prevailing contemporary theory shifts the focus from the air itself to the debris it carries. During the dry, brittle months of winter, the atmosphere becomes a suspension of microscopic projectiles. In rural areas, these are sharp grains of silica and jagged fragments of dried vegetation. In the high mountains, they are needle-like crystals of ice, hardened by sub-zero temperatures until they possess the structural integrity of glass. when a specific set of geographical features, such as a narrow mountain pass or the artificial canyons created by high-rise, buildings converges with a sudden atmospheric front. These particles are accelerated to incredible velocities. They become a natural version of a sandblasting machine or a high-pressure water jet cutter. When this stream of abrasive material strikes the skin at a precise angle, it can shear through cellular walls with such speed that the edges of the wound are effectively polished, preventing the immediate raggedness we associate with a typical cut. The physiological mystery of the missing pain and blood is then explained through the lens of cryology. In the environments where Kamaitachi attacks occur, the air temperature is often low enough to cause significant peripheral vasoconstriction. The body, in its wisdom, pulls blood away from the surface of the skin to protect the core organs, leaving the extremities in a state of semi-numbness. The cold acts as a potent anesthetic, dulling the nerves before the invisible blade even strikes. When the cut occurs, there is no blood to spill because the vessels are already clamped shut by the freezing air. It is a perfect storm of environmental factors. The wind provides the kinetic energy, the grit provides the edge, and the cold provides the mask. Yet, even this robust explanation falls short when we encounter cases where the victim's heavy wool coat remains completely intact, while the skin beneath it is deeply lacerated. How can a physical particle, a grain of sand or a shard of ice, pass through the weave of a garment without leaving a single broken thread, yet manage to draw blood or the lack thereof from the flesh beneath? This is the point where the materialist explanation falters, and we are forced to wonder if there is a dimension to the wind that our current instruments are simply not tuned to detect. The lore of the Kamaitachi is far from a monolithic tradition. It is a living, breathing tapestry that changes its colors, depending on the soil from which it springs. In the Hida region, the entity is whispered to be a cruel mountain deity that demands respect through fear, often striking those who speak too loudly or show arrogance in the presence of the peaks. In Aichi Prefecture, the description takes on a more vivid, almost pyrotechnic quality. There, the phenomenon is known as inchi, and it is said to be a weasel-like beast that doesn't just cut, but leaves behind a faint, glowing trail of blue fire as it streaks through the midnight woods. These regional variations are not mere inconsistencies. They are localized adaptations of a universal human experience, the sudden, violent encounter with the unseen. If you look at a map of these reports, you will see they cluster around areas of extreme topographical complexity. Deep valleys where the wind is squeezed into a frenzy, or steep slopes where cold air tumbles down like an invisible waterfall. The folklore serves as a cultural mapping of dangerous microclimates, a way for ancestors to tell their children, "Be careful in the shadows of the valley, for the air there has teeth." Historical records provide a chilling testament to the persistence of this phenomenon. In the pages of the Koshi Yawa, a sprawling collection of essays and observations by the Edo period Lord Matsura, Seizan, we find numerous accounts of high-ranking samurai and humble merchants alike who were struck down by the malignant wind. One account describes a warrior walking through the streets of Edo on a clear, breezy day. Without warning, he felt a tug at his side, as if a playful child had pulled at his kimono. When he reached his destination and removed his outer layers, he found a gash across his ribs so deep that it reached the bone. Yet his silk undergarments were untouched. The shock of such an impossible injury often led to more than just physical scarring. The Koshi Yawa notes that victims frequently fell into a state of deep melancholy or suffered from wind fevers, a psychological collapse brought on by the realization that their physical safety was an illusion. In a society built on the rigid honor of the sword, the idea of being defeated by an invisible, mindless blade was perhaps the ultimate indignity. It shattered the warrior's sense of control over his environment, proving that even the sharpest katana was useless against the caprice of the atmosphere. In our modern era, we might think ourselves safe behind the double-paned glass of our climate-controlled offices and the reinforced steel of our urban infrastructure. But the Kamaitachi has not vanished, it has merely moved into the city. Modern architects and urban planners have inadvertently created the perfect habitat for this ancient monster. When wind hits the face of a skyscraper, it is forced downward and sideways, accelerating as it is squeezed between the narrow corridors of the concrete jungle. This is the Venturi effect, a principle of fluid dynamics that turns a brisk breeze into a localized gale. In these artificial canyons, pedestrians often report being knocked off their feet by invisible walls of air, or finding mysterious, clean-cut tears in their expensive designer jackets after a particularly windy commute. We see these stories pop up on social media and anonymous message boards, modern digital versions of the Koshi-yawa. A student in Tokyo, a salaryman in Osaka, a tourist in Nagoya, all sharing the same story of a sudden chill, a ripped sleeve, and a bloodless mark on the arm. The doctors at the local clinics shrug their shoulders and blame hidden sharp edges or industrial debris, but the victims know better. They felt the wind breathe on them. They saw the way the air shimmered just before the strike. The setting has changed from a mountain path to a subway entrance, but the predator remains the same. If you find yourself fascinated by these intersections of the macabre, the scientific, and the legendary, if you want to dive deeper into the mysteries that linger in the corners of our modern world, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of seekers. By subscribing, you ensure that you never miss a journey into the heart of the unknown, and you help us continue to shine a light on the shadows that history and science often leave behind. Your support is the wind beneath our wings as we navigate the treacherous currents of the unexplained. Before we conclude our exploration of the Sickle wind, let us look to the wisdom of the past for a way to walk safely through the gale. Ancient tradition suggests that one can protect themselves from the Kamaitachi by carrying a slip of paper from a traditional calendar, or by reciting specific protective charms when the wind begins to howl with an unnatural pitch. To a modern mind, this sounds like pure superstition, but there is a profound psychological utility in these rituals. By performing a small intentional action, you transition from a passive victim to an active participant in your environment. You sharpen your awareness, you steady your gait, and you focus your mind. In a world of chaos and invisible blades, the greatest shield is not a physical one, but the armor of a prepared spirit. Nature is a vast, beautiful, and utterly indifferent force that can grant life with one breath and take it away with the next. The legend of the Kamaitachi is a reminder of our own fragility, a call to humility in the face of a universe that we have yet to fully map. The next time you step out into a cold winter evening and feel a sharp, sudden gust tug at your collar, do not merely pull your coat tighter. Listen to the whistle of the air, watch the way the shadows dance on the frost, and remember that you are never truly alone in the wind. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and above all, on those nights when the breeze feels a little too sharp, please be careful out there.